Good morning. Today is the Tuesday, the 12th of May. And today, nurses in different countries around the world will be commemorating and giving thanks for the life of Florence Nightingale, who was born 200 years ago today. She was born into a wealthy Christian family, and from a very early age she has an inquisitive mind, and she was always asking why. She also had the nature that would like order and systems to different things. It's interesting looking back at how she was brought up in a time when middle class women were thought to be just stay at home and then eventually get married. Her father thought that her and her sister should have a broad education and was against the fact that at the time that people thought it was a waste of time educating women in more serious subjects. But he persevered, and he brought Florence and her sister under his tuition. He not only taught them Greek and Latin, but various other subjects. When reading about her early years, the words of Jeremiah 29:11 come to mind, which says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declared the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you." In 1837, Florence's caring nature came to the fore when there was an outbreak of influenza, and she not only looked after the people in the household, her family and the servants, but she ventured out into the nearby village to care for them as well. It was in the same year that Florence recorded a strange and mystical experience. As she sat in her room, she believed she heard the voice of God speaking to her. She believed that he was calling her to a life of service. She didn't know what that mysterious call might mean, but she was determined to find out. In 1844, Florence began to make plans to pursue her ambition in the fields of nursing, and she gained experience in a local hospital. Her hope was to set up a small organisation of well-educated upper-class ladies who wanted to dedicate themselves to nursing. Her family were horrified. In fact, they were very shocked because at the time, nurses were held in very low esteem by people in society. It's interesting to look at the opposition and the barriers that were put in front of Florence, and yet she was determined to find out the goal that God has set for her. It's understandable that Florence is best known for her work during the Crimea War, where along with 38 volunteer nurses, she was sent to Scutari to care for the soldiers in the military hospital. There she found horrendous conditions, and she also found out that the men were dying more of their infection than they were of the wounds from the battles. And this started her to think and plan out. And even now today we're aware of the Nightingale wards, which spaced out patients at a distance from each other. It's interesting how that's come back even in the last few weeks. She brought the national attention to public health issues. She was one of the first in Europe to grasp the principles of the new science of statistics and apply them not only in Scutari but into civilians' hospitals when she came back. One of the interesting quotes that I read about Florence, someone said of her that for Nightingale, the study of statistics was like a religious duty. To understand God's thoughts, she held we must study statistics, for these are the measure of his purpose. On return from Scutari, She used her skills to press for better training for nurses, improve public health such as sanitation and housing, and she was a prolific report writer. She died on Saturday, August the 13th, 1910, at the grand old age of 90, after a memorable and impactful life. In recognition of her 200th anniversary of her birth, the World Organization has designated 2020 the year of the nurse and the midwife. How ironic that at the time, little did they know what would meet nurses and midwives in this year. They say that this year is a time to recognise and celebrate all that is great about our profession at international level. We think about nurses and midwives today on this special day. We think about the experiences that they've been through in the last few months. We think about some of the things they've seen and the things they've heard, and some of the impact that they've had on people's lives. I think Florence would be proud of what had become of nursing and the influence and impact they've had on people's lives today. And as a retired nurse, I just think that to have the vision, the passion and the compassion of Florence is prevalent in nurses today. And I just seek that we remember them in our prayers, consider them when we meet with them, and seek ways of how we can support them as we come out of this pandemic. Not only are we celebrating Florence's birth today, but one of the young boys at church is 8 years old today. So I'd like to say happy birthday, Dedan, and have a lovely day. And Karen will be back with you tomorrow. God bless.